If Ripple's so bullish on XRP, why are they selling so much of the token? In this video, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about, because whenever we have an XRP all-time high, you see the XRP FUD going through the roof. In this video, I want to talk about why Ripple sells so much XRP. If they're supposedly so bullish on the asset, why don't they just hold on to as much as possible? Like always, your support means so much to this channel. Thank you to everyone who takes the time to like these videos and subscribe to the channel. These two simple things really do help me out so much. Also, if you have any good place to buy some XRP, make sure to check out my favorite exchange uphold down in the description of this video. With that said, let's jump right into it. I hope you guys enjoy the content. But like I said in the intro, I really want to talk about a very interesting conversation. This got a lot of attention on X over the weekend, and that has to do with, if Ripple is so bullish on XRP, why sell XRP? A lot of us have looked at the direction of XRP, looked at the direction of the cryptocurrency market, and purchased XRP because we believe that XRP is likely to appreciate significantly in price. But it begs the question, right? Why doesn't Ripple just hold on to all of their XRP? What's the point of distributing that XRP? If they're so bullish on it, why not just keep it? Now, on its surface, it seems like a pretty easy answer, right? Maybe they're just not that bullish on it, right? Maybe they are just not that optimistic on XRP. That's what a lot of the haters and the people spreading FUD want you to think. But let's take a closer look at exactly why they're doing things the way they're doing it and see if we can come to a more logical explanation. I want to start off and say, well, clearly Ripple is obviously extremely bullish on XRP. Not only have you seen Brad Garlinghouse specifically say that before, as well as other people at Ripple, but they wouldn't be a company that's so highly valued and so innovative and gaining so much traction if it wasn't for XRP. If you just zoom out and look at Ripple's business, they're doing a lot of interesting stuff in crypto, but their core product ODL is kind of just a swift copycat that probably looks a little better and functions a little better. Without XRP, without blockchain technology, they're really just an ordinary messaging company. There's nothing that special about them. The XRP ledger provides the core of the innovation of what Ripple the company is. It's Ripple's superpower. It's a way that completely changes the way money moves globally, and Ripple is the closest person to that technology, being the XRP ledger. It's very difficult for any other company to come in and disrupt Ripple's level of efficiency and speed on a transactional basis, because all these other companies are relying on outdated rails. They can't go redefine the rails. Everyone is limited by the plumbing in the system. Ripple's one of the few companies who can opt out of that slow, expensive plumbing. They have the capability to say, hey, while all of you other people just build applications and layers on top of an already broken system, we're building something completely new on a brand new system that no one's going to be able to compete with because our product is that much better. Now, if you zoom out and look at the XRP ledger and where XRP sits in it, XRP is the liquidity for this new plumbing and this new system. And it's never going to make sense for XRP to remain at its current prices if this system is highly successful and used globally. XRP is the liquidity engine in this new system. If you're going to have large amounts of liquidity on the XRP ledger, which would indicate a very successful system, you're going to need a high-priced XRP to act as the liquidity for this next-generation payment and settlement system. So Ripple, in its goal of being a successful company, obviously needs successful plumbing for their applications. That plumbing is the XRP ledger, and XRP is the pristine, decentralized liquidity for this next generation settlement system. So in it of that, you could already see that obviously a high-priced XRP is something that's critical for Ripple's success as a next generation payment, settlement, and clearing company. But that goes to say, right, if this is all true, why are they selling XRP? And this is where the conversation gets very interesting. First of all, Ripple holds a very large proportion of the XRP supply. And they've gotten a lot of criticism on this before in the past, right? And also, it just doesn't really make sense to have one company have such a concentrated amount of the supply of any given asset. Take a look at any asset in the world, right? It's better if it's highly distributed. Why? Because if it's highly distributed, you don't have to say, oh, well, what happens if Ripple does this, right? Ripple ends up, once the supply is sufficiently distributed, just another player on the network. No one's worried if Ripple is in or out of the game. Ultimately, even if Ripple is to sell all their XRP, if their supply was small enough, it wouldn't make any difference. Right now, Ripple holds so much XRP that that's still a potential issue and something people need to think about. And because of that, Ripple has taken the approach that it's probably better for them not to own 50% of the supply of XRP. Probably makes a lot more sense for them to own 25%, 15%, right? Somewhere in that neighborhood. Now, this doesn't mean they're not bullish on XRP. It just means that in order for the XRP ledger to be successful and XRP to be seen as a pristine liquidity asset globally by all counterparties, they likely have to make some adjustments in how much of the XRP they're holding. Now, this is where things get really interesting because you didn't really have this same thing with Bitcoin. Part of the Bitcoin protocol is that the Bitcoin is essentially self-distributed. You mine the Bitcoin, you go through these very complicated procedures, and the Bitcoin self-distributes to different participants on the network. Because of that, you never really had a situation like what you have in the XRP ledger situation where Ripple is holding so much XRP and essentially manually distributing that XRP. Now, you might be thinking, maybe that was a huge mistake, right? Maybe the XRP ledger should have mining and all these other things. Well, the truth is I don't really think so. It's just a different way of getting the token out there. We've all seen what mining has done to the Bitcoin blockchain. While it's made the token distribution extremely, you could call it fair and open and very distributed, it's also dramatically slowed down the chain and made the chain pretty much useless for its full intended purpose of moving value. The creators of the XRP ledger said, hey, maybe we don't have to do this mining thing. Maybe we can distribute the token another way, and we can make the chain vastly more efficient, better for its full intended use case, and something that's going to remain an important piece of technology for the use case that Ripple really set out to achieve in the beginning, which is instantaneous settlement, fast transactions, and a new plumbing for the financial system. But that was the trade-off, right? They couldn't do this mining thing and this distribution method that Bitcoin got away with. So the pro of Bitcoin was you had this distribution where it was evenly passed out to everyone who wanted it at the start. In XRP's case, right, it was a little different. Ripple took the ownership of distributing the XRP for other participants of the network. Now, this, to my estimate, is one of the cons of how the XRP ledger functions. But the important thing to note is it's a short-term con because eventually, right, all of these networks that are successful are going to have fully distributed token supplies, right? Eventually, Ripple's going to be done selling their XRP. Eventually, all the Bitcoin is going to be distributed. And at that point, there's no difference between Bitcoin and the XRP ledger because all the tokens are out there. The only difference is in the XRP's case, it didn't sacrifice the function of the network itself in order to do so. Bitcoin is essentially self-sacrificed the tech behind it in order to have this distribution. But in the XRP ledger's case, right, Ripple just said, you know what? We're just going to have to eat the fact that it's not going to be a perfect distribution, but that's fine. Eventually, the token will be fully distributed, and at the end of that, we will have a high-functioning network that can achieve our full intended purpose of the network, which is fast, instantaneous settlement. And this is where things are so interesting, because a lot of people are raising the question, why is Ripple selling the XRP? Well, ultimately, they have to. They need to distribute the token. The token needs to be distributed widely to different participants in the network who wants it. And there is just simply two ways to go about it. You either purchase the token through the Bitcoin way, which is you purchase some computer equipment and then use that computer equipment to essentially mine the token, which is, in my eyes, just an abstract way of buying the token. Or in the XRP ledger case, right, you just purchase the token, right? Ripple sells the token, people purchase it. It's just a different way of distribution. But Ripple has a critical function in this role. They have to distribute that token. Eventually, they won't have that function anymore. But part of the XRP ledger being successful is making sure the token ends up in the right hands. And this is where, albeit not perfect, the distribution of XRP actually has some massive advantages. Because Ripple has so much of the supply, they can make sure XRP ends up in the right hands or the people who matter. One of the biggest problems with Bitcoin is essentially if you were some computer nerd in the early days and figured out about Bitcoin, you could have mined huge portions of the supply, even if you're not someone who really matters. Maybe you're not even someone who really likes Bitcoin, you just saw it as a way to profit. That's the problem with Bitcoin. There was no actual way to control where the supply was flowing. In Ripple's case, they can make sure the XRP is distributed to the proper people and the people who are going to matter. And one of the consequences of that, they have to distribute the XRP. The XRP has to be sold. So none of this has anything to do with Ripple not being bullish on XRP. As we talked about in the beginning of the video, they have every reason to be bullish on XRP. It's critical to the function of everything they're building. But in the process of building this brand new system, sacrifices have to be made. And one of those sacrifices is in order to remain, or in order to keep the integrity of the chain itself, they had to distribute the XRP. Maybe in hindsight, 18 years later, right, there might have been other ways to do it. But at the end of the day, the XRP ledger is a top 3 blockchain. It's having massive success with financial institutions. And for all intents and purposes, things are going extremely well. So it's not like it was some critical mistake. And in my eyes, because of the selective distribution and making sure it ends up in the right hands, I actually think it could end up being a massive benefit. Right now, people just use it as FUD, but they fail to understand that there's nothing different between Ripple selling XRP onto the market to distribute the token and Bitcoin miners buying a whole bunch of expensive computer equipment, using that to get the token, and then dumping the Bitcoin onto the market. It's the same exact thing, it's just a different distribution model. Bitcoin took this convoluted way to do it in order to make things seem fair and distributed, but they sacrificed the chain. In the XRP ledger's case, they simplified everything. They said, you know what, it might not be perfect in the beginning, but we're going to get the token out there. We're going to get it in the hands of the people who matter. And guess what? When we're all said and done, when all these tokens are distributed, at least our chain will still work. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed this update. And for now, Mickle out.